Hello, welcome to the Poet Friends, a place where poets meet to share their minds and thoughts. This is Poet Speak of Poets 7th episode, the Fatal Friends Initiative for Peace and Poetry. This is a monthly, program that tries to bring the world poets together, and basically the poets talk about other legendary poets of their choice from their respective country or from elsewhere. This basic idea of this program is to bring the world closer and erase all borders through literature. It's our pleasure and honor to invite, we had the pleasure, of course, there we had of three members, which was supposed to be joined by four members, but yes, we have Kathy, Soy, Asmin, who would be talking about their respective poets, and each would be given 15 minutes to present their uh, poem. I have along with me Dr. Rupali Sarkarkar, who is a former professor of Delhi University, uh, who will be acting as a uh, moderator as well, and she would be beginning the show, of course. Last week we had a you know honor of having Margaret Blake, who talked about Ernest Thomas. Marian Theft talked about Margaret Atwood. Leonard Lund talked about Carl Sandburg. Mona Jem Faresco talked about Jane Hirschfeld. And today, uh, yes, Kathy would be talking about Jane Austen. Soy would be talking about Robert Eo. And Esmin would be talking about Audrey Lorde. The order would be, yes, of course. Soy would go first, and Katie would go second, and Asmin would go third. Since Soy would be joining, Soy, it's too late for her, so we'll give the opportunity for her. Okay, but let's begin the program. I'll ask, I mean, I pass on the mic to my doctor, my guide and philosopher, Dr. Rupali Sarkar, to begin the program. Over to you, ma'am.
Good evening, dear friends and poets who are here this evening. Most welcome. And thank you so much, Prasanna, for inviting me also to be here. It gives me great pleasure to be able to listen uh, to poets who are speaking about other poets. And we bring the world together closer. And Fertile Brains is specifically, has an objective, an agenda. And for the last 5 years, a little more than 5 years now, I think, isn't it, Prasanna? You've been working so hard to do this, and you have managed to bring together with the cooperation of poets from all over the world. So today, this evening, we are going to listen to some, great poets who we have read about. We have read also, but some that we haven't, and we may have forgotten the details and the specific positions and status of these poets. We start with who are we starting with, Prasanna?
Soy Avocado. And Jennifer Leong.
Uh, she's going to read about this is Soy Avocado, is it? That is Jennifer Long Soy Avocado. Most welcome, dear friend.
You.
Pushcart Prize 2025 nominee Jennifer Leong Soy Avocado started writing poetry in 2021 to fundraise for autism in Singapore. Through divine inspiration, she invented the Duatres Penta step poetry form. Her poem Hills in this form won the Spirit of the Festival Award at the Francis Brown Literary Festival Multilingual Poetry Competition 2022 in Ireland, and advocate of hope who advocates for poetry's accessibility to all. She often writes multi-directional poetry. It was an epiphany to her that poetry is not merely about wordplay, as it lifts the spirit of both poet and reader. She believes there's a poet in each of us and facilitates workshops to encourage poetry writing. You're a poet of my heart. This is what I believe that poetry should do. And I'm so looking forward to hear you talk about one of Singapore's most representative poets. And I think you will tell us about him. And that is um, Robert Yeo. Is that how you pronounce it? Is it Yeo?
Yes, absolutely correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. Well, Robert Yeo is 85. He was born in 1940. Um, yeah, so that makes him 85. My math is not very good, but yeah, I think he's 85 this year. And I had the pleasure of checking with him my choice of poems, and he gave me the green light as far as the choice is concerned. So I'm really very, very privileged to have this opportunity to actually discuss with him what I was going to say. And so the first one I'm going to talk about is called The Search. So I had to search for his poems because he had written so many, right? So, okay, so I thought I'll just start with his first poem called The Search. He sought no nook to start his search, did not even know he had begun till it was well begun. Knowledge dilated his nostrils, and every road became an appetite. The town and its people, succulent food, a 10-course Chinese dinner with suckling pig. Everywhere was somewhere, and everybody was somebody. It was not time to choose. His diaries became thicker, year by year. On undulating loops of the trunk road, replenished by leisured tributaries, surprise is far away. Yet still the journey has charm enough to invite continuance. Here, one learns to like what one's accustomed to. Pleasure does not pall, though still one passes interminable scenes, the rubber trees inescapable almost as the forest is. Coconuts, pepper trees, hills of oil palm, flats of paddy green, mangrove and lalang. Abandoned mining pools that won't be lakes. There are no inns down here, only villages, small towns, and big towns. The sun is everywhere. The signs are not always where they should be, however, except, of course, Selatan and Utara. One is always traveling up or down. As a side note, Selatan means north and Utara means south in Malay. And we come to the next poem called Christian Cemetery. This is interesting because Singapore, as we know, has got very limited land. So many times when we bury people, after a while, a certain number of years, we have to exhume the remains of the deceased, and then they would have to be cremated or somehow they have to leave the cemetery in which they were buried. So this is called Christian Cemetery. These tombstones have been uprooted, chipped, Madonnas and broken crosses, all weathered grey, are strewn on grass. Never thought I would see them thus. These stones that have been here so long, it seems the land was theirs for good. But for the Urban Renewal Department, which needed that plot for a park. My granny, though Catholic, was cremated according to her wish. She knew room in our affections was all the space she needed. Or perhaps she'd heard all about urbanization, how her stone, had she been buried, would wear away or be dislodged. And so when she had to give up what space she occupied, She left us something that cannot be lost in stone, and therefore fears no renewal. The other thing about Singapore is also we have a lot of instant trees. We are known as a garden city, and sometimes we want very quick trees that are already ready for us to transplant. So we have all these trees that we just transport from the nursery to the road dividers and to traffic islands, to whatever place we deem fit to have all these instant trees. So this is the background to instant trees as well. Dividing roads or spacing them are what appear to be trees. Leafless branches, stumps against the sky, so neatly cut and planted, you'd think they were made of plastic. But if you pause to look before your eyes, they'll root and leaf, and you will be left wondering why you've not seen them before, so much a part of the city they have become. Nature, who is responsible for trees, is not responsible for instant trees. The Parks and Recreation Department is our second nature and our green father. I also know Robert's wife, and her name is Esther, and she shares the same family name as me, Leong, L-U-N-G. We haven't traced back our ancestry, but as far as we know at the moment, we are not related. I mean, not that we know of, but I suppose maybe 10 generations before we could have been related. But anyway, these three poems that I'm going to read now are actually three poems that Robert wrote for his wife Esther. And it's about gathering snow in Iowa City. Because he spent some time in Iowa. And in Singapore, as we know, does not have snow. Well, we're not supposed to have snow. If we have snow, then it's a bit scary. But having said that, we actually had hailstones before, off and on. I think the last time was quite a while ago. Yeah, but snow, no, never. So, okay, so this is Gathering Snow in Iowa City. Three poems for Esther. First snowfall, November 16th, 1978. Today, 10 years later, snow falls again. White flakes descend diagonally, slowly, leaving me time enough to stir you from your bed. You had wanted so much to see snowfall, and when you did, you asked, can we go out to catch it? You are but one of the many changes the decade has wrought. 10 years ago, snow fell, and it was London. When I looked out, there was no one I could wake, whose hand I could hold and say, isn't it beautiful? No one to whom I could explain patiently, knowingly. No, these are flakes and fluffy. You can't make a snowman with this first snow. For that, it has to be wetter, more substantial. Second snowfall, November 22nd, 1978. Well, it's just a few days later. The guy Mitchum's travel said, it's snowing. And sure enough it was, as we emerged late in the afternoon. The flakes were bigger this time and came down faster, enough for you to fashion them into snowballs. The city was slowly turning white. People moved deliberately, and buildings and parked autos were immobile beneath the drift. Suddenly, the landscape moved on wheels, revving, belching, and as I watched, a black, billowing tail zoomed down, whitening Clinton. Subsequent snowfalls. After subsequent falls, I'm nearer the faith of 40. It's not in snow knowledge that change is evident. Knowledge about what sky divulges I can accumulate as children gather snow to make snowmen. But self-knowledge, How can I gather that? The only thing I know I can collect for sure is age, only to rue the fact that wisdom is not necessarily harnessed with the years. The corn has just been harvested in Iowa, snow's falling, and you're here waiting to gather something as real as snow. Let that suffice, and let us try to make of our gathering a snowman. The next poem is quite different. It's election 1976, but I suppose elections happen in many parts of the world, so this was his take on election 1976. Until this election, until I saw his poster, I did not know his face, I did not know his name. His people put up posters. That's all I see they do. They did not canvass house to house, even though elections due. Though it's election time, I've not heard his speeches. He can still see me face to face. He can still make me promises. He was our last MP. He hopes to be our next. He can still get to know me before polling day. And I have a few more poems. The next one is Cares. How often daily cares help us forget the once-in-a-lifetime cares of other people. 3 piles of clothes lie in a corner snug while the Vietnamese here wait. If they only knew, for me to remember, and remembering to stir sufficiently to take the bundles to them. Today, I just about remember to be at the service of a cancer-taken friend, but arrived too late to console his widow. She takes her last look before the coffin's sealed, and overcome, clutching her daughter's hand, is led away to head the stream of mourners. In pursuance of such proclivities, I am careless. As they file into church, I find myself in the opposite direction from them, unable to sit through the service because, being late, it will be lunchtime soon, and then there's a letter to post, a lecture to give. How such giving is the cause of much misgiving. The next one, no refuge from Kampuchea. Although nightly, the horror is boxed. If not, we'll bleed to death. We'll stare and blink so hard, we have to wipe our glasses in disbelief. At the collection of skulls in the killing fields, there must be something more that we can do. Newsreaders' monotone cannot betray, nor that of journalists on the spot. It's we who are in the spot, who cannot read nor report, but can only watch and wait for news to end on what will not be a good night. For the stirred conscience can never find refuge from what is in the living room. At most, we do not switch on. But the newspaper is in the home, and it too is flammable. Shall we choose to burn or bleed to death? And the last poem is Spring, a suburb in Copenhagen. This particular poem is very special to me because I recited this poem at the first ever Singapore National Poetry Recitation competition in 2023. And Robert was so kind as to go in person to support me. Yeah, so this is very, very special. Yeah. Spring, tens on hands and one knee. It's about to spring. I start out with him as gesture. He sprints for the sun and leaves me to the lapping of my leisure. Around the cool lake where boats wait upon reeds, as in a Chinese scroll. A ripple of the gull's cry spans, flies with the wind across a clear sky. Anglers fishing for the sun, catch him, scaly, squirming, but oh golden. 2 stately swans glide towards the middle isle, drawing the blue expanse. And I think I'll just end here because it happens to be celebration of Chinese New Year, which is also a celebration of spring according to the lunar calendar. So yeah, this is the season of spring. Thank you.
Thank you. That was lovely. What a beautiful diction and the rise and fall of your intonation for reading and introducing Robert. You was such a pleasure and taking. I was really thankful to you for taking your time and coming. And I'll go across to Rupa or Rupai ma'am to share her views.
Well, thank you so much. Can I call you Soy?
You can
And
call me Soy, you can call me Jennifer, you can call me
okay,
whatever you wish. Yeah, it's okay.
what's in a name, right?
Yeah.
And firstly, let me thank you for this wonderful presentation, for bringing to us on this forum a poet that we hadn't read before, at least I hadn't. And I know that, I've heard of him because he's, very representative of Singapore. And I think that you have selected the right poet for this evening because he represents all that you believe in. You believe in the accessibility of the poet, the people you're addressing. You believe there's a poet in everyone. And then there is this, he's talking so much about what is happening around him. He's not going into some sort of a space that we can't reach out to. It's his people, it's his city, it's the snowfall, it's the elections, and I do believe that there is a poet in everyone's heart. And you have, you know, uh, expressed that very well in all the poems that you selected. Very much, and I believe you do workshops. I read your thing, you do workshops. And how do you find when you take up a workshop, do you do it with children or do you do it with the adults?
I do it generally with older adults
Okay.
because we don't really have a culture of writing poetry, not for the people who are in the more senior category.
Mm-hmm.
So I do these workshops generally for people who have time to come down in the mornings on weekdays. Yeah, so that, if you're a working mother or if you're homemaker or if you're retired or grandparent, the kids will generally be at school in the mornings. So then they can come and join the workshops. But I've also had people who were on vacation, undergrads joining the workshop, and they got along so well with the neighbors at the table. So yeah. So
That's
it's
a that's
beautiful,
a
yeah.
great service, It's a great service to be able to do that. And I think we've been able to do that with Fertile Brains too. We have poets who never wrote earlier, but now they are very well known and they have also got published. And the other thing is that I would end it by saying that, the culturally, like you said, it's Spring Festival. We've just, today is our Spring Festival. We call it Basanta Panchami. Basant is spring and Panchami is the days of spring. So we
Oh,
have,
wow.
yeah, and we have a big celebration yesterday also, today also. And today we worship a muse called Saraswati, the goddess Saraswati. In fact, the Indonesian embassy in the United States has a huge statue of goddess Saraswati because she is the goddess of learning, of music, of the arts. So we are celebrating that today. And the fact that you mentioned this means that I've come to know something and you brought us closer to each other because we share the same things, we're the same people. We are
Yes.
the people, right? Thank you
We
so much.
thank you.
God bless you.
God bless you too.
We are the world and we are the people, and there is a common thread everywhere. If you find,
Yes,
you try to find it. So, and yes, you could take this page as always, ma'am suggested. Soy, I'm always there for you to, you could set that thing up. Okay. Thank you, Soy. Thank you for sharing your work, and I love your presentation. Up next is, she is a very great fan of. What do you call it? Jane Ashton. Ashton, she has special place for so Kathy. Kathy He hails from Missouri, he's a USA, she writes in English, and is an author of 4 poetry books on Amazon, and you will find it on Amazon and Lulu. Her work is found in many international and themed anthologies. She's a member and former moderator for growing Facebook poetry group called The Passion of Poetry. So let's hear what has now got to us. So Jane Ashton, Kathy.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay. All right. Well, as I had mentioned to Kumar, I have not ever really studied much except brief encounters with famous poets when I was in school as a young person. But I've always loved poetry, but I wasn't immersed in it and they didn't have internet. So it was something that I grew to love, that I have written poems through the years at different times. And I've always loved words. And so I would study the dictionary. And I found so much to enjoy in the dictionary because I could find the meanings to words. And I have really enjoyed getting on Facebook now. In 2019 is when I started writing poetry in earnest because there were groups with prompts and so forth. So I just blossomed and I've enjoyed it very much. And like I said, since I hadn't really studied that many poets, I was invited to join a series of writers that was contributing to an anthology on Jane Austen. And from what I hear, she has a large following. In fact, what was really unusual, last night I haven't looked at it yet, but there was like a presentation, a movie of some sort, and I haven't looked at it, so I don't know, about Jane Austen. And that's sort of strange. My daughter said, "Wow, you're going to talk about it, and then it's on a movie." So anyway, she was from Hampshire, England, and she was born in 1775, and she died in 1817. So this is many years ago. But she was one of 8 siblings, and she had one sister who was her best friend, and they stuck together like glue. They were very much friends. You can be friends with just about anybody, even your own family members can be a friend. So she was very prolific in writing. And she had a brother, Henry Austen, who really recognized how important that her writing really was. And she wrote anonymously. That means she wrote these novels, but she would put anonymous as the author. She did not want to put her name on there. And so she was very modest about that. But she had a lot to say, and her words were very constructive because she had a lot to say about the things that mean a lot to human beings, marriage, and I mean, she had some constructive things to say that when people marry, they need to educate one another, which is very unusual for anyone to say. And because back then, especially, it was nobility, it was like high class people, you had to marry a person of high class. People had, certain divisions. And they wouldn't approve. If you find some farmer that you loved, you could not marry them because they weren't high class. Well, she did away with all that. She brought people down on the same level, no matter what their status was. And so that is one big point that I fell in love with her because it fills a need that many of us really need to embrace, not to categorize people, not to push people away because they may be from another country, they may be another color of skin, they may not be a same class, they don't make as much money, but she put everyone on the same level. And and the English country folk really loved her writing. And it was after her death that her brother, Henry Austine, made sure that her work was published. He even helped her as she wrote a lot of her works to make it, flow. I don't know what all he did, but he was kind of like an editor. He helped her. So he was very passionate about her writing and exalted her writings. And you go and you can buy, and this is a long time ago, but you can go to any bookstore and even online, you will find many volumes of her work, Jane Austen. And it was her sister that painted the picture that you see on most of those books because that shows her love. And she was artistic too. So I had some more things that she had an older brother, James, that was a prolific poet. And I want to buy his book. I just saw it. Has a lovely painting of his. They didn't have photography that long ago. It has a picture of him. And so there's a lot to enjoy about this. And I thought that I could name over the books. Now, I'm sure probably most of you poets that do study poets, famous poets, have read her books. But like I said, I never have. But she did write some poetry. And since I'm into poetry, but I thought I would list the volumes and you might recognize them by their names: Sense and Sensibility, Mansfield Park, Emma, Northanger Abbey, and Persuasion. Now, her mother was a poet, which is wonderful because I learned from my grandmother that my grandmother wanted my mother to be a poet. She wrote one poem in her lifetime, very nice poem. But I guess she passed that flame, that torch to me. So I hold it high. So poetry means a lot to me. It's a way I can express myself. And at times that I can't say things in any other way. And I can, words matter a lot and the way you say them. And so, and another thing about Jane Austen I really like is that she did a lot of rhyming. And so, since I'm a real rhymer, and I know that everyone is not, and that's fine because there's different methods of poetry. Some is free verse, which a lot of people use free verse because they don't have to have any parameters. But I just wanted to bring Jane up because I had the opportunity to send 2 poems in to this book, Jane Austen, an anthology of thoughts and opinions on Jane Austen. This was, I think, in 2020 maybe, or 2021. And the author of the anthology is Eyelyn S. By. She's the editor. She put it together. And I'm thankful for this chance to, and I had to do some research. The lady said, well, would you like to contribute some work? And I said, well, I don't even know her. Well, if you don't know someone, you've got to find out about them. So I did research. And I want to show you a smidgen of what it is that made Jane Austen the person she was. And I named my poem Jane's Trait of Pure Genius. Jane had a trait of pure genius. According to Henry, her brother, she gave character to everyday people, gave them status like no other. The truth, the spirit, and ease were shown, far greater than much of what was known, of her humor in the way she spoke. She satisfied English country folk. According to Henry, she turned lead into gold. But the secret of the process she just never told. She was mistress of her very own style, not using others' methods for success all the while. So that was about Jane Austen. And I looked up, since I do a lot of research because I'm also a genealogist. So I looked for some little known facts about Jane Austen, because a lot of people may read her books, but they don't study about her. And like I mentioned, Henry, her brother, is the one that exalted and her work and made sure that it was published after his sister's death. And I named my poem Henry Spilled the Beans. Henry just loved to spill the beans. Exciting news was hard to keep. Forget being quiet, not saying a peep. He'd tell the world, and by all means. His sister Jane was a wonderful writer. She could make your world seem so much brighter. Her words just popped, so full of juice. Each word you'd read could be put to use. If 'twas left to him, he would make sure that Jane's talented pen would not be obscure. Oh, how the world would love her so. The more they read, no, the more they'd read, that love would grow. So Henry did what his heart had told, made sure Jane's works were printed, sold, made sure his sister's talent was shared. His heart was happy, for he had cared. So that was what introduced me to Jane Austen. And I have a poem that Jane wrote, because she was really not that well known as a poet, because she didn't write a lot of poetry, but she had a very interesting way of wording that really took people by surprise. So kind of a mixture of satire and humor together. So let's see what you think about this one. And the name of her poem is When Stretched on One's Bed. As you're lying in bed, in other words. Okay. When stretched on one's bed with a fierce throbbing head, which precludes light, thought, or repose, how little one cares for the grandest affairs that may busy the world as it goes. How little one feels for the waltzes and reels of our dance-loving friends at a ball. How slight one's concern to conjecture or learn what their flounces or hearts may befall. How little one minds if a company dines on the best that a season affords. How short is one's muse, or the sauces and stews, or the guests, be they beggars or lords. How little the bells, ring they peals, toll they knells, can attract our attention or ears. The bride may be married, the course may be carried, and touch nor our hopes nor our fears. Our own bodily pains, every faculty chains. We can feel on no subject besides. 'Tis in health and in ease we the power must seize for our friends and our souls to provide. So I thought that was a very good poem, because putting it in a nutshell, if you're ill and you have a terrible headache, you don't care about all the finery, all the things that mean so much to you when you're not feeling ill. And so that's what her poem's about. And it's very kind of unusual, maybe, a subject for a poem, but we can identify with it, and we can understand what she means, because I'm sure we've all had headaches. And if we have a throbbing headache, it's like, who cares about anything? You want to just go to bed. Anyway, I really enjoy being a poet, because it's like finding a treasure, a hidden treasure. Every time you sit down and you want to write words. And Jane Austen had that feeling, because she wrote so many wonderful advices for her English country folk. She appealed to them because she brought everybody on the same level. And I think that is so commendable for a poet, because no matter how famous you are, if you can treat everyone alike and with respect and love, you have won their hearts. And that's what I have to say. I don't know if I've gone over or if I've gone not enough, but that's what I have to say, because poetry means everything to me, simply because it's a way that I can communicate when I can't any other way. And I can say things that I couldn't say in any other way. You can say things that might offend someone if you know poetry well and can say things just so. So, yay for poetry. I just love poetry, and I'm glad to have this chance to bring Jane up and get her before the public. I'm sure she already is. But like I said, since I'm a poet, and she did write some poetry, even though the novels were her specialty, you can see she knew how to use words. So I hope you got a blessing from the poetry and the information about her, and you will go and look her up if you haven't read what she has to say. So that's my little presentation today.
You have got
Thank you for the
really
chance.
profound presentation, and with the love towards Jane Austen, Kathy. Kupari, ma'am.
Yes, very
Well,
much.
you know, thank you so much, Kathy, because it's been very, while I've enjoyed, listening to you, my heart has been feeling a bit embarrassed, because imagine, I taught literature, English literature, for many years, and I taught Jane Austen, but I really didn't know that she was a poet. And today you have done something that we actually set out to do on this program. We want to
Absolutely.
know. We want to know. We want
Right.
to learn. And you've done that for us,
Yeah.
So have you, so you brought us
Thank you. Thank
to
you.
such
I'm
a
so
well,
glad.
And then,
I'm very
how did
glad.
you,
That's my
how,
whole point.
and how did you do it? Because you're so passionate about poetry that you found a poet who we know as a novelist. We've taught in every school syllabus in India, Pride and Prejudice is there. In the university syllabus, Pride and Prejudice,
Yeah.
Emma, these books are there. We know about Jane
Yeah.
Austen very
Yeah.
well. And that world,
Yeah.
that she depicts, as you said, it's very humane. It's very much what in India our literature is all about. And therefore,
That's
but
right.
today what you have done is that you have really broken the stereotype. And if I'm saying this, having been a student of literature, a teacher of literature, that I didn't know Jane Austen as a poet, and you have really, really fulfilled the objective of our program.
I'm
So
excited
so
about that. I'm
much.
glad that you got those vibes, because I didn't know anything about her, whether she was a poet or a novelist. I didn't even know about her.
Look at
But
that.
the reason I knew she was about the poetry, because this book was about her. And I think some of those people knew that she was also a poet. And of course, being in a poetry anthology, you're going to be writing about this lady. Yeah, she was a great writer, but her poetry speaks especially to those who love poetry. And she didn't write a lot of poems. Let me tell you, you need to read them, because they're very much something that you'd want to read. And like I said, you have to get a little bit used to her English from back in the day, simply because even though we write poetry in poetic terms, back then you might have to look up the way they present things, because you may not understand exactly what they're saying, because they use words that we may not use today.
And you said
But
something important. You said something important, and that is one of the reasons that novels are still being read. I mean, it's more than the 18th century, and we're reading her
yeah,
novels. We are subscribing to them. You can go to any bookstore, anywhere,
yeah,
online, offline, and you have Jane Austen. But what you said is
yeah,
that it is because she is actually, as Soy says, a poet at heart. Every person is a
yeah.
poet. And I
Well,
connected with, yes,
and
and therefore
her,
her language is poetic. Her language is
that's
poetic,
right.
you know?
And she had a brother that was an accomplished poet, and a mother that was
Yeah,
an
just look
accomplished
at that.
poet.
Look at that.
So what else could she? What, she had to have a little poetry in there, right? She had to have it in her system. I'm so glad that I found Jane. because I
Thank
think
you.
she's a wonderful person. And like I said, her most glowing asset to me is that she put everyone on the same
Yes,
level. That's why she's so popular, because even though back when she wrote it, it was not so.
yeah.
People were classified as this bracket or that bracket, and you were looked down on. You were looked down on if you wanted to marry, say, a farmer and you were an elite. So making everybody on the same level, that's kind of like what we're trying to do here is get people from all over the world so
Yes,
we can get our feelings for each other out there, because we are all
absolutely.
humans. We all have the same emotions, and we need to express them and promote them. So that's
Thank
what
you
I have to
so
say. And
much.
I'm
Thank
so
you so
glad.
much.
You're very welcome.
Exactly.
And I am very glad that you were blessed by this, because when we bless others, we're blessed ourselves. So you've made my day too.
You made us,
Beautiful.
your proud, Kathy, if you could ask me what was the first book that you had your hand on as a novel, Emma was the first book. And Emma and
I
Jane, and I couldn't
um
understand. It was all,
okay,
you
yeah. I named her books because she
it's
had
hard
some
not.
books that were not published because she died before she could finish them. But Pride and Prejudice is the most popular volume. And I don't know the order up, but and Shakespeare, well, everybody knows Shakespeare. I mean, I even know I haven't read a lot of it, but have you heard of Lord Tennyson?
Yes, yes, of course. Alfred
Okay,
Lord
so
Tennyson.
let me tell you what Lord Tennyson said about Jane Austen. Lord Tennyson said she understood the smallness of life to perfection. That was what he said about her. And Sense and Sensibility is another one of her volumes. Mansfield Park. Emma, EMMA. I think it was a friend of hers that she wrote this about. And Northanger Abbey, like I said, and Persuasion. I have not read any of those books, but I
Oh,
concentrated on
you,
her poetry because since I'm a poet. But I watched a little video clip of someone telling about it. I should
Kathy,
send it to you.
I'm
It
afraid
was fabulous.
I'm
It was
afraid I
fabulous
have
because
to.
it was kind of a little
Oh my God.
cartoon cutouts, and this guy was telling about her and what she did. It was awesome. I thought it was very
Well, I
done
have
very
Thank
well.
you.
I have so many
Yeah.
confessions to make this evening. One is that I really didn't know that she was a poet. The other is that, when I read that I came to know that you were going to talk about Jane Austen, I kind of said, okay, it's a poet's meet. What are we going to do with the novelist? And my God, we turned the whole
That's
thing.
why I needed to read one of her poems so you could see how she wrote.
Yes, thank you
And
so much.
Thank
another
you.
thing besides the poetry, since like I said, I do a lot of rhyming and I love a lot of the different ways to rhyme, and she
Thank
uses
you,
it
Kathy. We
very
are running
well.
out of time. I
End
must
rhymes and middle
stop you
rhymes
and
that all over the place.
thank thank you, Kathy. Thank you.
You're
I
very
can see
welcome.
how. So up next is Asmin. Ma'am, would you love to introduce her? Asmin is an international poet, best-selling poet, ma'am.
Yes, yeah, Yasmin Brown is an international best-selling author and poet. Yasmin can tell us more about herself because she's just sent us 4 lines. Tell us more
Yeah.
about yourself.
Uh, my name is Jasmine Brown. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm an author and I am a poet, and I'm also an advocate for women's mental health. I advocate also for abuse, domestic and sexual assault, and I write self help books, and I write poetry, whatever comes to mind, or if I'm doing prompt poetry, I also write about that prompt. I started writing poetry actually when I was around 6 years old. We used to do like writing assignments in school, and that's when I first started. Kind of fell in love with it. I thought it was really fun. And then I ended up like, as I got older, of course, getting away from that and, living life. But I end up coming back to it just probably about a year or so ago, a year or two ago. I
Awesome.
came back to poetry, but I started actually writing books in 2018 is when I actually started authoring books. So I have several books out, self-help, children, and now poetry, um, just
Awesome.
a part of different anthologies. And I will soon, sometime this year, have my own book out of poetry.
Awesome. Good. Awesome.
So
So
today, Yasmin, you're going to tell us about uh, uh, Audre Lorde. Is that how you pronounce it? How do you
yes,
pronounce?
Audre
Yes,
Lorde.
Audre Lorde. And you know, she's a poet, essayist, professor, feminist, and an equal rights activist. And in the kind of things that are happening in the world today, I think this poet stands out for what we want for the ordinary people that Jane Austen brought together in her book that we are talking about on this forum. When you say, I mean, she was an activist for the LGBT community, and now when you hear the president of the United States saying that there are only two genders, none other, you're so shocked because even in our Hindu Indian culture, we have accepted everything. We have accepted all genders. All our stories have other genders too. It's never been exclusive. It's been very, very inclusive. And then we come across now these kind of statements being made, which really shake us up. So I'm very happy that you're bringing to us today a poet who herself has worked and spoken and lived a life which has been so beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So I'm just gonna give you a little bit of her history, and then I will also introduce you to some of her work. The poet I chose to highlight for "We Are the World" and "We Are the People" is Audre Lorde. She is a woman born in 1934, and she was born to West Indian immigrant parents in New York City. She is a mother of two, and she was an activist on many fronts, which was racism, sexism, classism, and homophobia. And as a Black lesbian warrior, educator, feminist, she became a powerful poet. And I selected Lorde because I see a lot of her in me. She is a fighter who used literacy to reach far beyond her tangible stretch. I utilize my work to express compassion, education, and feelings to build bridges across oceans. And like Audre Lorde, I communicated my emotions through poetry, and so did she in her younger years. In eighth grade was when she started her poetry journey. She published her first poem in a magazine called 17. I actually used to read that magazine when I was younger. So I'm dating myself a little bit there. She graduated from Columbia University, Hunter College, and UNAM, which is a Mexican university. Lorde was an intersectional feminist and contributor to critical race. She was a contributor to critical race studies, feminist theory, civil rights activist, and queer theory. Audre Lorde also received the McDonald Fellowship Award in 1979 and then again in 1983. She was the poet laureate in 1991, from 1991 to 1992. Some of her work included The First Cities, From a Land Where Other People Live, Your Silence Will Not Protect You, and that was essays and poems. Her books include one of my favorites, which was Sister Outsiders, which was a book of essays and speeches, which also became bigger than her poetry. And a couple of other books that she wrote was I Am Your Sister and Uses of Erotic, the Erotic as Power. And at this time, I'm going to share one of her poems with you. It's called For Each of You. Be who you are and will be. Learn to cherish that boisterous Black angel that drives you. And up one day and down the next, protecting the place where your power rises, running like hot blood from the same source as your pain. When you are hungry, learn to eat whatever sustains you until morning. But do not be misled by details simply because you live them. Do not let your head deny your hands any memory of what passes through them, nor your eyes, nor your heart. Everything can be used except what is wasteful. You will need to remember this when you are accused of destruction, even when they are dangerous. Examine your heart of those machines you hate before you discard them, and never mourn the lack of their power, lest you be condemned to relive them. So I chose this poem because it talks about acceptance of your feelings and being aware of your feelings and allowing you to actually go through your feelings and allow them to flow through your body. And just because the outside is actually trying to destroy you, in other words, or create a certain despair in your life, you don't necessarily have to hate them. Just process the feelings and kind of, move on and express them as she did in poems. That's why her poems were so powerful. Her biography films, that was actually done, there was actually three of them. One of them was called A Litany of Survival, The Life and Work of Audre Lorde, 1995, by Michelle Parkson, Parkson. The other one was Audre Lorde, The Berlin Years, 1984 to 1982, and that was in 2012, by Dagmar Schultz, and The Edge of Each Other's Battles, The Vision of Audre Lorde, 2002, by Jennifer Abad. And in 1978, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And after her mastectomy, the doctors found that the cancer had spread to her liver. And through her diagnoses, it led her to receive the American Library Association Award and the Gay Caucus Book of the Year Award for her the Cancer Journals in 1981. In 1992, she received the Bill Whitehead Award, and Publishing Triangle instated the Audre Lorde Award. And then she was laid to rest in 1992 from breast cancer. So I would just like to leave um, some last words from her poem called A Litany for Survival. And for those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decisions, crucial and alone. For those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love doorways coming and going in the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward, at once, before and after, seeking a noun that can be breed, futures like bread in our children's mouths, so their dreams will not reflect the depths of ours. For those of us who were imprinted with fear, like fate line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk. For by this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hope of silence us. For all of us, this instant, this triumph, we were never meant to survive. And when the sun rises, we are afraid. It might not remain. When the sun sets, we are afraid. It might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive. And that poem actually basically sums it up to no matter how afraid you are, to still stand your ground and to have a voice in your situation. And that's all I have about her.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Esme. What a powerful, the expression of the house is very much powerful. Please, Upali ma'am.
Yasmin, you brought to us this evening a very powerful poet, a poet who has self-described herself as a mother, as a warrior, as a lesbian. And she works a lot with this, as a feminist, what you call the intersectional, poetry, a feminist, the intersection. If you could tell us something about it, tell us what does intersectional feminist mean?
She actually was like a feminist, but she was a person that I guess back in that time it was the ideal, the ideal relationship because she did have kids, but it was like she fought against the political realm, um, using her words as an activist through literature. And she also actually had the opportunity to go to Germany, um, in which she actually started dating this lady um, that she met in Germany on one of her, um, travels for education. Um, and, they kind of couldn't, because of the time, she couldn't, or they couldn't, they weren't supposed to actually be together. But through their interpreters, because the lady spoke German and she was a American, they were able to communicate and became close through that. Um, so as a poet, it was more of, or a poet and an author, it was more that she used her literature to actually express the words that she was feeling or needed to feel about activism. And that is how she basically expressed or taught that to others.
Thank you. You know, her concern for the kind of biases that a human being has to face, it could be gender, race, class, disability, at so many points, the intersection of so many points, there are these biases. So we are not facing one kind of bias. We have to be, facing so many kinds. And I think that, her poetry and the fact that she believed that the poet must speak up. If the poet doesn't speak up, if the poet doesn't, take a stand, then poetry is of really of no value. And I think that we, all of us who are here, we too believe in that. We too believe that, poetry is a very, very powerful medium for, carrying to the people, that, putting behind us differences, and the differences are increasing, and therefore
Yes.
it's become imperative that we as poets now write stronger poetry and make it accessible, as one of our poets today make it accessible to the people. Thank you so much for this wonderful evening of poetry, and to know so much about other poets. It's a learning evening, right? Learning evening.
Thank you.
Yes, man. Thank you. And indeed, enough.
Thank you.
The fact is that intersectional poetry is what you mentioned about, and how important it is to have becoming a serious poet, and it's empathetic. Like Rupali ma'am said, bringing closer and getting to know about the you, as you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, we are the people and we are the world. That signifies this show. Thank you, Soy, Toy and Jennifer. Thank you, Asmin. Thank you, Kathy. Kathy, you're undoubtedly speechless
And I think,
tomorrow.
Prasanna, if you could also, if they're not, they participating in your Sunday program, your open mic program, then you have the solo presentation. Just tell them so that they can join whenever
Yes, yes.
it's convenient
Of
for
course.
them.
Asmin could be part of that, and Soy and Kathy, of course, is there. Anytime you could just ping me on, and I'm there for you to settle. Always, there for you. Thank you for being part of
Yeah,
this.
thank you so much.
Show. Right.
You're very
God
Um,
bless
welcome.
you
Glad
all.
to be
You're welcome. You're welcome.
here. Thank you so
look,
much.
look, looking
You're
forward to
welcome.
for the next
Yes.
session.
Yeah,
Yes.
Thank you.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Take care.